Ole Miss could be without their top weapon when they come to Baton Rouge. We've got the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Brian Kelly met with reporters on Monday to set the stage for this week's game against Ole Miss, and he's hoping for a dramatically different result, not just on the scoreboard, but how it plays out on the field than what happened in Oxford a year ago. We'll talk about that. Kelly also gave a brief but significant update on 3 injured LSU starters, but I want to start with what's going on at Oxford, as a matter of fact. And Lane Kiffin met with reporters on Monday to begin LSU week, and he was asked about Tre Harris. Now, if you were here over the weekend, we talked about that Ole Miss game against South Carolina, and a lot of people asked me all throughout last week, "Hey Matt, who do you want to win? Do you want Ole Miss to lose? Maybe so they feel like they're out of it when they come to Baton Rouge. Do you want them to win so it's a bigger game?" Listen. I didn't really have a strong. My feeling was I wanted Ole Miss to lose. I wanted Ole Miss to lose because I want to clear the deck. I want every hurdle ahead of LSU possibly eliminated. But I thought that was far less consequential than the style of the game against South Carolina. Ole Miss had a very physical game against Kentucky. As a matter of fact, their injury report going into South Carolina had 30 players on it. 30 out of your 85 scholarship players were listed on the injury report by Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. So going to Oxford, really what you wanted was for it just to be a really physical, taxing game on Ole Miss, and it was. Walter Nolan, their great defensive lineman, left with injury. J.J. Pegues, defensive lineman, left with injury but returned. And maybe the most significant was Tre Harris. Tre Harris is Ole Miss's best offensive player. With respect to Jackson Dart, and a lot of the other terrific players on the offensive side of that ball. Caden Priestcorn, the tight end who was preseason All-SEC. They've got some great players over there. But Tre Harris has been really the engine. And I was watching the game, and he left, and it was not good. He left in the first half and did not play at all in the second half. And Lane Kiffin was asked about Tre Harris at his Monday press conference, and the update was not good.
We don't, as you guys know, we don't really get into much detail on that. He couldn't finish the first half and wasn't really close to going back in the second half. And he certainly wouldn't be playing today. So, we got to get the other guys ready. We got to perform better than we did in the second half without him. We only had 3 points. Now, we only threw 1 pass in the fourth quarter. But that makes us move people in different spots when he's out. So we're preparing to do that and preparing to play without him.
So Lane Kiffin started by saying we don't really get into that, and then really got into that. Said, he wasn't close to playing in the second half. You've got to move a lot of guys around, and we're preparing to play without him. First of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not ever going to sit here and celebrate an injury of a young person. Tre Harris is a fantastic young football player. If you don't know his background, he's from Lafayette. He went to Como. Started his college career at Louisiana Tech, where he became All-Conference USA. Transferred to Ole Miss, where he played the 2023 season and was really good in 2023. Had just under 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, averaged 18 yards per reception. He was great. And a lot of people thought that he would leave and go pro, but elected to receive. And Tre Harris already, let me put this into perspective for you, how good he is. A year ago, when Tre Harris was a Biletnikoff watch list guy and a semifinalist, had 54 catches for 985 and 8 touchdowns. Right now, Tre Harris has 52 catches for 885 yards and 5 touchdowns. He is 100 yards shy, 2 catches, and 100 yards shy of his season total from a year ago in just 6 games, really 5.5 games this year. In half a season, Tre Harris has effectively equaled his production from a year ago. There's no other way to say this. Tre Harris is Ole Miss's best offensive player. If you really want to go look statistically at who else is there, we can do that with their receivers. As I mentioned, Tre Harris has 52 catches. The next leading receiver on the team is Caden Lee with 18. Juice Wells, 17. The tight end, Caden Prescorn, 11. Jordan Watkins, 10. Henry Parrish, the running back, 9. You get the point. Tre Harris has 52 catches. 52. The next highest receiver is Caden Lee with 18. I'll say it again. Tre Harris is Ole Miss's best offensive player, period. And if he's not able to go, that is a massive blow for Ole Miss coming into Tiger Stadium, especially against this LSU defense, which at times clearly has been susceptible and mostly in the secondary. You know, against LSU a year ago, Tre Harris had 8 catches for 153 and a score. That was his second highest single game receiving total of the season last year. And you better believe that kid from Lafayette who went to Como is going to be sky high to play LSU. So again, I'm not going to celebrate an injury to a young player. Tre Harris is a great young player from Louisiana, and I want good things for him. And I don't want any player to get injured. However, we have to talk about that because that is a fundamentally disruptive piece to Ole Miss's offense when there's no other pass catcher within 40 receptions of Tre Harris throughout the first 6 games of the season. So yes, that is a story we are going to follow. And I was watching that game when it happened, and the injury did not look good at all. A lower leg type injury. And we'll see what Tre Harris might be able to do this weekend against LSU. But if he is not able to go, yes, that is an unfortunate circumstance, but would be a huge benefit to LSU. Meanwhile, LSU is getting healthy. It's why my contention has always been, it's not just who you play, but when and where you play them. It's why at SEC Media Days and when we were filling out our win-loss records on teams, I had LSU winning this game. I'm not telling you today they're going to win. Okay, I think this is very much a coin flip type game. But in the summer, the reason I liked LSU here, LSU coming off a bye and at home. Ole Miss, this will be their 7th consecutive game, 3rd consecutive SEC game, and back-to-back road conference games. That is a really, really tough spot. And this is a team that is physically beat up. They were after Kentucky, and it didn't get any easier on them on the road at South Carolina. Now they have to go on the road again to Baton Rouge, night environment, Tiger Stadium. It's going to be electric, and that might just be the difference for LSU. But we will follow Tre Harris and the rest of the health questions as this week moves along. Speaking of which, Brian Kelly updated the injuries of 3 LSU football starters. We'll get to that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Roy. Been my pleasure to tell you about Roy. It's time for the Roy Player of the Week, but LSU didn't play last week, so I don't necessarily have a Roy Player of the Week this week because LSU didn't play. However, I could give it to all of Vanderbilt just because they gave us something to celebrate. But the Roy app, ROI, the Roy app lets you directly support your favorite athletes. This is not like collectives where you make a donation to a general fund. Roy lets you choose the specific athlete you want to support. So you back the players you care about. In return, you can get exclusive content after the season. You get personal videos, updates, other things like that. And the best part, it's risk-free. Listen, this is important. If the athlete transfers or doesn't create the content, then you get your money back. So you got to check out Roy. They're doing their part in bringing fans closer to their schools and athletes with exciting giveaways. So Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. LSU, Alabama, hint, hint. So here's how you enter. Download Roy, R-O-Y, in the App Store or Google Play. Use code LOCKED ON when you sign up, and you're entered. It's that simple. If you're already on Roy, make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll also be automatically entered. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. So go to joinroy.com for official rules. Download Roy, try it out. There's no subscription, there's no recurring fees, and for as little as $10, you can get in the NIL game. Roy, support players, change the game. So as we mentioned, Lane Kiffin updated Tre Harris's injury situation. Well, Brian Kelly was asked about 3 injured players as well. You might remember a week ago during the open date, Brian Kelly was asked about injuries, and he effectively said, it's the open date. I don't have to give you an injury report, so I'm not going to. And the last time we saw LSU play against South Alabama, Caden Durham suffered an injury, as we were told at LouisianaSports.net, and reported that he suffered 2 dislocated toes. Now, you can go WebMD it, and the recovery for dislocated toes ain't exactly easy or good, but we'll continue to wait and see how it plays out throughout this week. But Caden Durham, Isaiah Alexander missed the South Alabama game while still working through the concussion protocol. And then Brian Kelly did actually disclose an injury to C.J. Daniels, a knee injury that they feared the worst initially. C.J. Daniels is a guy that had a torn ACL earlier in his career. Well, Brian Kelly said they got the best news possible on C.J. Daniels. And Brian Kelly was asked on Monday about the injury to those 3 players, and he gave a very pithy response.
Are Caden, CJ, and Zai expected to practice this week?
Yes.
All 3?
Yes.
That was it. He wasn't given nothing else. As of those 3 players, Caden Durham, C.J. Daniels, and Zai Alexander, were all going to practice this week. He said, yes, all 3. Yes, if you missed it, that's what he said. So just one by one very quickly, if I could. So I think the Caden Durham piece here is super significant. He has helped you find your running game. You know, the season opener against Southern Cal, you were struggling to run the ball, and then you started finding your offensive rhythm on the ground with John Emery. And then we know what happened a week later. John Emery suffered the torn ACL as season ended. And it wasn't until Missouri that we started to see Caden Durham emerge. But this is an LSU offense that has been imbalanced. It has been pass heavy. Now, Brian Kelly has said the reason that they've been pass heavy is because they're not getting fair looks at the line. And if teams are going to continue to crowd the line of scrimmage and give LSU man coverage on the back end, then they're going to take advantage of it, throw the football. And as a result, Garrett Nussmeier, before the open date last week, was top 5 in every major statistical category: yards, touchdowns, completions. He had an open date, so he dropped a little bit in those. I think he's 5th and 7th, respectively, in all those statistical categories. But he's still, one of the elite quarterbacks in the country in all of those categories because they're throwing the ball, and he's been quite effective doing it. But yes, I think in this ball game in particular, to avoid what happened a year ago, you don't want to spread it out and sling it all around and get into a score fest. You're going to want to try to do what Kentucky did, which is control the line of scrimmage and shorten the game. Sometimes the best defense is a good ball control offense. And that might very well be what LSU is going to try to do. And clearly it'll help if you have Caden Durham out there. Now, C.J. Daniels, we talked about last week. He is a guy that has 20 receptions on the season through 5 games. And he, according to Pro Football Focus, has the highest drop grade, meaning he's the best at catching the football and not dropping passes. So he has been a security blanket. In fact, he's been better than Mason Taylor in that respect. It's his highest grade, as a matter of fact. Daniels on PFF has been dinged a couple of times because of penalties. They don't really like penalties a whole lot over at PFF. That algorithm doesn't. But he looks like he's going to be healthy and good to go. And you're probably getting Chris Hilton back as well. Again, one of the benefits of where this falls on the schedule. And then there's Zy Alexander. Listen, if Tre Harris is there or not, we know what Ole Miss is going to try to do. Yes, Lane Kiffin likes to spread you out to run it, but he also wants to throw the ball with Jackson Dart. And Zy Alexander is your best cornerback. That is just objective fact. He's your best guy. And if you have a healthy Zy Alexander and a healthy Ashton Stamps as your 1-2 at corner, it at least gives you a chance, as opposed to the season opener where out of necessity, because Zy Alexander wasn't healthy, you played Sage Ryan, 51 snaps at boundary corner. I've given you this statistic before, but Sage Ryan played 51 snaps at outside corner against Southern Cal. He has played a total of 1 snap at outside cornerback since. So, yes, having Zy Alexander and Ashton Stamps as your outside cornerbacks makes you a better team here this weekend against Ole Miss, and even more so if Tre Harris is unavailable. So all those storylines will continue to follow. Again, LSU had the opportunity to kick up their feet, to rest, to relax, to get right, while Ole Miss has had to play some pretty physical football games the past 2 weeks. Now, the tables turn coming shortly. Arkansas has an open date this week. LSU has to play Ole Miss and then go to Fayetteville when Arkansas will be coming off a bye. So you're going to be up against that again. You will be up against that at one point this season. All those breaks end up evening out. So you got to make hay while you can. It means LSU's got to go find a way to win this game at home this weekend against a banged up Ole Miss team. So can they avoid the reality of a year ago where you had a 9-point lead late in the game and you just got into a score fest that you lost 55-49? We'll delve into that because Brian Kelly was asked that exact question at his Monday press conference. We'll let you hear what he said and we'll react to it next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel. Want to bet on the Tigers and the Rebs? Look, that total's 64.5. I know there's a lot of people who are going to bet the over in that game, just assuming we're going to see the same game we did a year ago. I'm not so sure, especially if Tre Harris is out and if LSU wants to play a little slower game. The under might actually be the play, but make up your own mind. And if you do, make sure you play it over at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com, get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. Brian Kelly, when he met with reporters, was what's the word? Pensive, thoughtful. He was asked to look back on last year's Ole Miss game. And when you really take a step back and think about it, the Ole Miss game a year ago in Oxford is the one that really cost LSU a title shot. Now, I know they went and lost to Bama later to finish with 3 losses, but we'd never seen a 2-loss team make the college football playoff in the 4-team era. And after losing the opener to Florida State, when LSU lost to Ole Miss, that was their second loss before the calendar even flipped to October. So in many respects, the championship goals felt like they were off the table a month into the season. And it was a hideous way to watch that football game. You lost 55-49. I mean, there should never be a reality where LSU or, I mean, really any team puts up 49 points in regulation and loses a football game. But that's what happened to LSU in that game in Oxford because they couldn't get a stop. And it was just grotesque. LSU put up 637 yards, 49 points, had 34 first downs, and lost. Inexplicable, really, other than the fact that you had the worst defense in the history of the program. So Brian Kelly was asked, what did you learn from that game? And he took a deep breath and he kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit before he finally answered the question.
You know, obviously you're going to turn on the film from last year and you're going to look at it and go, okay, that's not what we want to be defensively. And, you know, trying to do too many things. Players that, certainly would say that, from a coaching standpoint and a playing standpoint, we're much further along. That's not the same defense. So, look, the game comes down to when you're playing an up-tempo team like Ole Miss, you've got to get lined up. You got to get your cleats in the ground. You got to tackle. And I think we probably talked about this last year after the game. It, didn't tackle very well, didn't get lined up, and it didn't play fundamentally sound football. And so, it starts with that premise, and then you move from there, right? Different looks. Try to get the quarterback off schedule, and at the end of the day, try to make any offense, regardless of what they do, one-dimensional, and that we'll try to do that again this year.
Try to make any offense, regardless of what they do, one-dimensional. When Brian Kelly said that, the first thing that rang in my brain, let me ask you this question. If I said, okay, LSU's played 5 games this year, which team offensively most closely resembles Ole Miss? 5 games this season. Which team offensively most closely resembles Ole Miss? You know the answer. It's Southern Cal. It was LSU's opener. Just think about it. Jackson Dart, Miller Moss, similar. Jackson Dart started his career at Southern Cal before he transferred to Ole Miss. You've got very talented receivers. Southern Cal even has a former SEC running back from the state of Mississippi in Woody Marks. And you've got 2 of the best offensive play callers in the game in Lane Kiffin and in Lincoln Riley. And LSU, this LSU defense held Southern Cal to 27 points. And that was a 20-20 tie until Southern Cal scored with 8 seconds to go in the ball game. I would submit to you that if LSU in Tiger Stadium Saturday night against Ole Miss holds the Rebels to 27 points, LSU is going to win that football game. Now, I don't know if they can do that, but remember what Brian Kelly said there. You want to try to make an offense one-dimensional. Go back and look up the box score from that Southern Cal game. LSU allowed 447 yards of offense, which is a lot. But there's only 69 of them on the ground. USC ran 23 times for 69 yards. They threw it 37 times, 27 of 37 for 378. What LSU made Southern Cal do was consistently try to march down the field, the length of the field with these long sustained drives, throwing the football instead of running it. And it worked. By and large, it worked. this same defense. Now, Jacoby Guillory has been lost for the season. Harold Perkins has been lost for the season. But at that point, you didn't have Zy Alexander. Sage Ryan was playing boundary corner. You hadn't yet seen the emergence of Deshaun Spears at safety. He only went in the game after a targeting penalty late in the game on Jordan Gilbert, forced him out, and then obviously put Spears in the game there at the very end. Point is, I would even argue now 5 games in, you know your personnel much better. They're in a better position to help you. Ahmad Bro hadn't emerged. Don McKinley wasn't available yet. Gabe Relaford, I think, is taking on certainly a larger role now. We've seen the shuffle of the linebacker spot, especially after Harold Perkins' injury. I think you're an even better defense today than you were that opening night in Las Vegas against Southern Cal. And you made them one-dimensional. And that's going to be LSU's charge this week as well, with Ole Miss coming to town. Can you make them a one-dimensional football team? Now, what you want to avoid, obviously, is a shootout, which is what happened a year ago. And Brian Kelly had thoughts there as well.
Those questions are, assuming that you have, strengths on either side of the ball. I mean, I've always felt as a head coach, you're trying to keep the points down, right? And you're going to do whatever's necessary to score touchdowns. But you're presented with the team that you have. And last year, clearly we were tilted one side, and we had to play, unfortunately, the game that way. I didn't like it, but that's what we had. And so we were in a situation last year where we were trying to outscore, and it's not the right way to play. It was the only way to play. I think there's much more balance in our football team, and we don't want to play that way. We want to play good defense. We want to keep the points down, and we want to score appropriately. So if you're asking the question relative to how it fits, each and every week, we don't want it to be a shootout. We want to play the appropriate level of defense that allows us to run our offense, that protects and plays complementary football. And I think I've said this so many times. I felt like at times we didn't play complementary football, and I want to be able to play complementary football where our offense complements our defense and vice versa. And I know this is the long answer to the question, but that's really what we're looking to do here at LSU.
Wants to play complementary football. Does not want to be in a shootout. I think we can all second and third and quadruple that notion. We'll see if they're going to be able to do it Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. But as we mentioned, with USC as a comp, that defensive effort probably going to be good enough to give you a chance to win that game on Saturday night. Tigers find themselves as about a field goal underdog in this game. We'll see if that number holds as we get closer to kickoff. Okay, that'll do it for us here today. Hey, thanks for making this your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, go check out Locked On SEC and my guy, Chris Gordy, LSU alum. You can find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are listening on podcast, thank you so much for being there. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.